like when I started thinking about Fantastic Four creatively was when I saw the movie Forrest Gump.
Something we've been teasing for months and months, man, when it comes to Tom Scioli, and the announcement has finally been made by Marvel Comics. Fantastic Four Grand Design. First off, congratulations, Tom.
Thanks.
Do you want to give us an overview of the issues that you're covering?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I know up to a point the issues I'm covering, and then I'm sort of leaving a little bit of room to, like, see how this thing develops, to kind of organically figure out how far I want to go into the ending. But I'm planning to do, like, the whole, like, kind of like what Ed did with X-Men. It's like, what's the Fantastic Four that matters to me, and make that story and make it make sense. So, I mean, I start with the origin of Galactus, and then I take it all the way through. Like Galactus is like the big threat of the series, and so I'm gonna take it all the way into like the deep future, like kind of like a Days of Future Past type thing, and even reference like the Days of Future Past, because the Fantastic Four figure into that in a big way. And since it's a grand design thing, I am in a like it's me doing my thing, but I want to play off what Ed did with X-Men grand design also, and Days of Future Past was a big part of that. The Watcher was a big part of it. Now the Watcher makes a lot of sense just having him in the Fantastic Four. Like he's like more a part of the Fantastic Four than he is part of the X-Men. So if he's a big part of the X-Men story, then he's an even bigger part of the Fantastic Four story. But I mean, I'm gonna just fit as much as I can. And I'm gonna have a couple iterations of the Fantastic Four. It's just like, am I gonna get to all of them? Am I gonna get to the Hulk and or the She-Hulk? Ghost Rider, like that incarnation,
It was regular Hulk.
It was regular Hulk. It wasn't She-Hulk.
It was Grey Hulk.
Grey Hulk. Yeah. And like
Fix-It.
Just the fact that I haven't read those tells you they're probably not going to make it in. So, but I kind of adjust. It's like Tarantino said, when he writes a movie, he writes to like the 3/4 mark or the halfway point, and then he knows that like whatever plan he might have had in the beginning for the ending, it's going to change, because that journey that you go on in telling that story, all kinds of things are going to come to you. So I kind of left it like that. So I have like an ending that I could do, but I'm thinking something better is going to come along just out of the process of making this.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. We've known you for a long time, Tom. Biggest Kirby fan I've met personally. This seems like a book that must be in many ways a dream book for you. Yeah,
it is, and like I've kind of had a history with Fantastic Four. The first thing I ever did for Marvel was for a Fantastic Four book, and then like Godland has a lot of like Fantastic Four type elements to it, and then I did a like Final Frontier, which has some Fantastic Four type elements in it too. So it's like in a way I've been working on this book. All those. I've been working on it my whole career. Like I'm pulling from. Like I've just thought about that Fantastic Four a long time. I think like when I started thinking about Fantastic Four creatively was when I saw the movie Forrest Gump. So it was like 1994, and I saw Forrest Gump, and just watching this, I was like, this is how you do a Fantastic Four movie, because like Gump, it was all this. It was cobbled together of like bits and pieces of other movies, and it moved super fast. It would be like, okay, now we're in. Midnight Cowboy. Okay, now we're in Platoon. Now we're in like it would just go through these movies so fast. I'm like, that's how you got to do the Fantastic Four. You don't do like, oh, movie 1 they fight the Mole Man. Movie 2 they fight Doctor Doom, and then movie 3 we saved the best for last. Here comes Galactus. It's like, no, you got to do the entire history of the Fantastic Four in 2 or 3 hours. Like you just keep it moving. Just like, okay, pre-credits, origin of Galactus. After the credits, origin of the Fantastic Four. Then the Mole Man shows up. Then they meet Doctor Doom. Then they meet Submariner. Blah blah blah. And then you get to Galactus at the end. Maybe like that's how you got it. So I've just been thinking like creatively about the Fantastic Four for a long time, and I can't really say that about any other projects I've done. Like all the other projects I've done have been kind of like, okay, let me figure this thing out now. Like I didn't have some G.I. Joe story or Transformer story I've been dying to tell my whole life. But Fantastic Four is one of the things that I have been sort of playing with in the back of my mind all these years.
What do you respond to with the Fantastic Four? Like, why have they captured your imagination for so long?
Well, I like their world. I like the world they like. My favorite thing about the Fantastic Four isn't those four characters. It's everything else. It's almost like they're like ciphers. They're these reader identification characters that you can explore this really fascinating world with. You know, just the Silver Surfer, the Inhumans when they show up, the Silver Surfer, Galactus, Black Panther. There's this, and then just that subterranean world of the Mole Man, Doctor Doom's Latveria. Like all of these things began in Fantastic Four. I mean, the one big exception is like Submariner. Submariner's world is a really fascinating part of Fantastic Four. Didn't originate with the Fantastic Four, but all those other things I mentioned did.
How does this differ from X-Men Grand Design?
I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, first of all, like, X-Men is just a very different comic than Fantastic Four. So a lot of the ways you approached X-Men don't really apply to this. It's just a different book. It's just like you came up with a really great like sort of way of approaching things. That just it doesn't like there's bits of it that you could use on Fantastic Four, but like X-Men. X-Men is a lot more generational. X-Men centers around a school, and you have this like revolving door of characters that come in and out of it and do it organically. Where like Fantastic Four, when you take those four people out of the Fantastic Four, it's kind of jarring, and it's usually done in the comics as a gimmick. Like it's not really organic to the whole the way it is in X-Men. So that's one, and X-Men kind of creates a it's almost like a world in itself. Like it creates this philosophy. There's these good and evil mutants everywhere, and who's going to come forward. It's got a great mythology, and Fantastic Four. It's a little harder to spot what that mythology is, and that's been a big challenge of it. Like,
Have you reinvestigated the Kirby Lee stuff?
Yeah, big time, and mine centers are like that. That's like the core of what I'm doing. Like a lot of the heavy creative lifting I've done is kind of building like a context before that, like is like the stuff before the Kirby stuff, and then an ending and like a destination for that. That's my heavy lifting. But then the core, the center of it, is all that Kirby Lee stuff, and like you'll see like a lot of that in there, and then other stuff to a much lesser degree. Like other stuff's in there from other runs, but to a lesser degree, and kind of integrated in like a different way.
When I read those old Fantastic Four comics, the Kirby Lee stuff, it's very much a Monster of the Month kind of comic with basically the villains are mustache twirling guys who tie people to train tracks and stuff, and then there's always the quick resolve and business as usual. How do you make all of that stuff like fit into a bigger story and not seem like a Monster of the Month? Is it going to be a Monster of the Page?
Right? Yeah, a monster of the panel. I mean, it moves really fast, and like when you take that the like macro view of stuff, like you start to like a story like kind of emerges. So there's some of that, but that was a big challenge. That was something I spent a lot of time thinking about. Is like how do you make this not just seem arbitrary? Not just because like X-Men does seem to have a pageant and a large arc that seems to go through it. And part of that was that like Claremont returned to it a number of times, where Lee and Kirby didn't do that. They did their thing, walked away. It's not like they came back a bunch of years later and kind of finessed things and added to it and made it work. So some of the things I focused on was I thought like the history of Fantastic Four is kind of like the history of the Marvel Universe, because like so much of the Marvel Universe starts in Fantastic Four. So I kind of approached it that way, and I started thinking about like the long view of like how these characters fit into the history. So there's like the Illuminati. It's kind of like this like more recent stuff that maybe you guys never even read.
I love it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know that, but I love that you're incorporating
Yeah,
Illuminati.
well, because they in like some somewhat recent, like some of like the Bendis stuff, they had like the Illuminati, which was like this secret society that it was like Black Bolt, Reed Richards, Submariner, and they like would get together and come up with these secret things. So one of the things they did was like, okay, we got to exile the Hulk, and stuff like that. So I just started taking the long view of like the Illuminati and applied it to like the Illuminati and that secret knowledge that like that there's like this like secret body of knowledge, and that Nathaniel Richards was part of it, and it's like, and there's the Illuminati and the Shield, these like sort of related secret society, like Marvel's full of secret societies, and so that there's this historical secret society that's like aware of this like larger world of celestials and eternals and deviants and monsters and like just Asgardians, just like all the magic and sci-fi of the Marvel universe that maybe like the average person isn't as aware of it. That this is like secret knowledge that's protected and that's treated as like that it's the people who have this knowledge, if they're good, like their job is to kind of protect the world from it, like secretly, this ongoing secret war that's going on for like thousands of years, and so that Reed Richards comes out of that tradition, and that his father was like a very big part of that tradition, and then he kind of learns about it. He like, after his father disappears, he like studies his father's notes, his papers, and kind of learns about this thing, and that's like the mission of the Fantastic Four, is to protect the ordinary people of Earth from these threats that can come from any direction. They could come from the microverse, from the negative zone, from from underwater, from Atlantis, and that the Fantastic. So that kind of gave what I felt like the Fantastic Four was lacking, was this like larger mythology.
That's awesome. How many pages are we talking?
80 pages.
80 pages.
80 pages,
a lot of
but
ground to cover.
They're super dense. They're, it's 20 panel pages, 16 panel pages, 25 panel pages. Like there's a lot packed, and it moves fast. And again, like watching you do X-Men, it's like you got a lot of ground to cover. And you just gotta keep it moving. You just gotta, keep going and cut like really hard cuts, really difficult. Like I've had to cut things from this story that hurt, but like you got to do it, And once you make that decision, like okay, I'm gonna do hard cuts, it's really freeing. You kind of have this like creative license to just go for it.
I was gonna ask you about changes or revisions. And it sounds like these hard cuts are what you're talking about. Anything stand out? Anything you want to share? Any surprises? Things that surprised you as you were going back through the material and maybe making one of those hard cuts?
Well, Galactus, like revisiting Galactus' origin was interesting to me because it's super obvious, but it never occurred to me that his origin is like identical to the Fantastic Four's origin. So, like my story kind of starts with the origin of Galactus, and reading this, you might think, oh, I'm reading the origin of the Fantastic Four, and then it becomes clear, oh, this is, so that kind of adds to that effect of like being part of some like larger pageant. And I guess like one of the big, like the specific cut I was thinking of is I had a page where it's like continues the origin of Galactus and sort of shows like the first planet he devours. And so I have a whole page of that, but there just wasn't room for it. Maybe in some collected edition, like some director's cut in some future, whatever, I'll do that. But there's just, that was a hard one to get rid of. It's a really cool page, a lot of cool stuff, but it was like, I just don't have time for it. And maybe the first planet we see him devour is just going to have to be Earth, or threaten to devour. It's just going to have to be Earth. Let's
go back to the beginning real quick. How'd this even happen?
I was approached by Chris Robinson at Marvel, who's the editor on this project, and he said, would you like to do like a Fantastic Four along the lines of Ed's X-Men Grand Design, something along those lines. And
I'm happy to pass the baton to you, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I much appreciated. I'll try to do right by it.
Yeah, right.
But he said this is really early. It's early stage, which is like seems to be like a lot of the projects I get involved in. It's like, this isn't a thing yet. We're just thinking about it. Don't commit too much, energy to it. Yeah, don't quit your day job. This is just something we're thinking of. And so, we talked about it a little bit, and I worked on it here and there, and took it like varying degrees of serious, depending on like how much time I had. Like, 'cause sometimes I'd find myself with, like a hole in my schedule and be like, okay, let me just like really commit to this. But it was just, just kind of talking, and sometimes I can't like I can't stop my imagination anyway. So even if somebody tells me like, oh, don't, this is nothing, don't think about it. Sometimes I can't help it, and I just start. And I kind of allow myself to follow a muse, and so my muse was, so I did like a ton of writing and stuff, and then it kind of, we kind of stopped talking about it for a while. I was working on some other things and stuff, and then started talking about it again. Then it went away, and then I had like GoBots was had like a similar trajectory, and it was kind of gaining steam, and it was about to get started, and like I really wanted to do Fantastic Four at some point, like I was kind of like, look, this GoBots thing, I'm about to fully commit to this GoBots thing, so just let me know if this Fantastic Four, because then I'll just like change the order or whatever, or say no to it or whatever, but and like he couldn't give me. He's like, we're still talking about it. It's not decided yet. So I went and I did GoBots, and then I assumed like oh, the Fantastic Four thing's probably dead. It's probably dead. And so then I just posted some of the stuff I had done, just kind of working on my own on it, and then like it posted it online, and then that got a pretty big reaction. People seemed like they were really into that and
That's
stuff.
the move.
Yeah, yeah, and then not too long after that, I heard from Chris again of like, okay, we're gonna do this. Like we decided, if you're still up for it, we're gonna do it. And I said, well, I started GoBots. I gotta finish this, and then I'll start it. So we figured out a schedule, and then yeah, here we are.
I have two questions from that, Tom. One is I'm curious about the differences between something like GoBots and Fantastic Four, but I'm also curious about your editorial experience in shaping this Fantastic Four story and turning in pages. Like what kind of relationship you're having with an editorial from sort of a collaborative, creative point of view.
Yeah, I mean, like in both of those cases, in the case of GoBots and Fantastic Four, the editors were pretty hands off. They really gave me the room to do my thing, and like that works great for me. That's how I got it. And like everything I sent them, they were like, "This is great. This is awesome." I like like there was there was the only pushback would ever be like sort of content things of like, oh, the F word, or things like that. Which I kind of half expected. Like I gotta at least put down like what I see as the honest, truthful version of the story I want to tell, and then if they're like, oh, we're not comfortable with this or that, then that's okay. But I gotta at least put it like get it on record, basically. Like this is how I see this.
Let's get it on record. Which GoBot said the F word?
Yeah, I mean the F word was more of a thing with Fantastic Four, because like they're the FF, they're the FF. So you gotta have the F word in the FF. What's the F stand for? And so I would use it a lot. I'd have like somebody say, and a lot of times it would just be somebody saying, "Hey, what the F?" Or and it would be like the big F, like in the lettering. And
I'm actually now thinking about those Fantastic Four pages that you put out online and tweeted and everything, and there are some striking similarities of some scenes in the first Sin City with some actual sexual copulation between like Johnny Storm and...
Well, because I thought of like the FF, I thought that there would be like a lot of fucking in, like that was kind of my like. Here's the like with X-Men Grand Design.
We're not cutting this, man.
Okay,
so say it.
with X-Men Grand Design, it's like, what is that? Because like you created it, and it was kind of like, okay, you're an auteur, you're a creator who's not from that world, like you do your thing, and so it's like, well, what is X-Men Grand Design? Or what is Grand Design? It's like, this is Ed doing his vision of what an X-Men would be, and it happened to be like a very conservative, like it was still pretty. You weren't doing anything crazy, like too crazy. You weren't, breaking all the rules or whatever. It was actually very faithful to the thing, and so it's like, but you chose to do that because that was like the story you wanted to tell and the best story you had to tell. So it's like, if there's going to be other Grand Design, if I'm going to do a Grand Design. What is Grand Design? Is it me doing me being an auteur creator and doing my auteur thing, and my thing might be worlds away from that? Or is it do a faithful, like a somewhat faithful, but still you and your voice kind of like true to yourself kind of story? Like, so when I was first approached with it, my leaning was, well, I'm just going to do it like my way. Like I'm going to do, and I'm going to shoot for the, like you did your things for your reasons. I got my own reason. I'm going to do like my thing. And again, like when I'm working really early in the creative process, I don't edit. which the more I learn about how other people work, like that's kind of the way you're supposed to do it. Like the first draft is for you. So that thing with like, so just taking scenes straight out of Sin City and putting them in and having like pretty like extreme content, that was just, this is the draft one and it can be whatever I want it to be. I'll fix it later or make it, or maybe it's perfect. Maybe this crazy thing is you just don't know until you see it on paper. So I
think it was perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But yeah, like as it went on, it was kind of like, okay, what they sort of decided was what we are looking for is something closer to what Ed did, where it's it's wild and it's out there, but it's still somewhat faithful to the mythology, which I was more than happy. Like there's a million ways to skin a cat, there's a million cool Fantastic Four comics you could make, and so it's like, okay, if those are the parameters, I can totally deliver on that.
Yeah, one of my reasons for being sort of conservative with the thing was like I was sort of determined not to create something that they could just take and like new characters or
Mm-hmm.
a situation could be made into a movie that I don't prosper from.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess creating the grand design thing is cool.
Yeah, that is like you created I just to take a minute, like you created like a new space.
I co-sign
Yeah.
your shit too, man, because there's some jobber wannabe grand design shits out there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get the Eddie P co-sign.
Yeah, I noticed that they don't have the Grand Design brand attached. Now, for me, like nobody said like, oh, you have to have, but to me, I was like I like the Grand Design. I think it's a good brand. Like I was proud to put, and I I hand drew like my Grand Design like logo on those things. So I don't know if it's optional or or whatever, but
it won't be after this point, man.
Yeah.
With two cool grand designs out there.
Tom, were there any other influences? You mentioned Forrest Gump, which is a pretty awesome one. Were there any other influences besides the Fantastic Four source material, the X-Men Grand Design, and I guess Forrest Gump? Anything else that informed this comic?
Just when you're doing like it's a big story, and so a big influence has been like sort of documentary filmmaking, because it's like there's this big story, and I'm just giving you I can't tell you the whole thing. Like I can't I can just have like this eyewitness or this person's telling their part of it. Like the story is bigger than the pages that are in there. So that's been an influence on approaching this. And when it's very freeing to take that documentary angle with things, because documentaries seem to have like way fewer rules than just like standard narrative kind of things. And other forms like fictional forms have done very well taking elements from documentaries. So that's one.
Documentary is a great one. I always, in the early days of X-Men Grand Design, the one thing that stood out to me was like journalism. It felt like a biography where you were using the comics as your source material. So documentaries that makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I know you to be a big devotee of Joseph Campbell, Hero's Journey, all that stuff. Does that philosophy factor into this narrative?
Yeah, actually in a big way. And I kind of forgot that, but early on when I was conceptualizing this thing, I have a notebook where I've sort of written down like my version of those like Joseph Campbell, like the 17 steps of the hero's journey and stuff. And I had that out. I was like, okay, I'm going to transpose Fantastic Four to the hero's journey. So I was like, okay, and that part fits there and this, and so I did do that. And I did I have two notebooks where I've outlined like the hero's journey of the Fantastic Four, and that's kind of the spine of what I'm doing. Like some of the stuff I've changed or messed around with, especially since like once I decided to make it more faithful to because I had some versions of the story where I was just like totally changing the Fantastic, where like Sue Storm is a musician and Submariner is like her manager / boyfriend, and like I was like early. I love that early stage of the creative process, because at that point this thing can be anything. It can be 12 different things. It can be 20 different things. And it's only like as you get deeper into the creative process that you kind of whittle it down. And it's like, okay, it's this. But then once you decide that it's this, then it's not this anymore. And it's not this. And it's kind of sad to say. But I have some pretty wild, like, other, like, fantastic. If I want to make a career out of Fantastic Four, I got a bunch of other approaches to it. And like with like GoBots, like some of the back matter in the GoBots trade that's coming out in a couple weeks. Like I wondered whether I should do this or not, but I decided I had like some very different ways I was thinking about approaching GoBot. So I included some of that in the back matter too, where you see like these where it's like, where does this thing fit in? Where it's just kind of I just like wanted to get some of that stuff out there.
Where are you at in the production process right now?
I'm at the halfway point. I finished. It's 2 volumes, and
Two issues.
Yeah, 2 issues. 2 issues. Each issue is 40 pages, like the X-Men Grand Design. It's 2 40-page issues, and then they'll be collected into like a big treasury edition. But unlike X-Men Grand Design, it's not going to be 3 treasury editions. It's not going to be 6 issues. It's just going to be 1 treasury and from 2 issues. So it's 80-page total. So I finished just a couple days ago. I finished page 40 of 80 and finished like all the different covers and variant covers and stuff for that first issue. So, and I've started work on issue 2. I'm into issue 2.
It took me about 6 months an issue on X-Men Grand Design. What are you clocking?
Yeah,
on that
6 months. It was like exactly that. It was like 6 months.
Yeah, it seems to be the way to go.
Yeah, it is funny because I wasn't planning like you sort of have your way of scheduling things of how you work, and for me, I was like, well, I want to do it a little faster than how you like you took like I think 3 years or so, or 2 years or something working.
6 months an issue.
Yeah,
6 issues.
So I was like, I don't want to take that long. So I'm like, okay, you were doing like a schedule of what, like 2 pages a week?
At the very least.
Yeah, at least 2 pages.
6 months an issue.
So my thing was like, I'm doing more than that. I'm doing like and then a couple weeks would go by and I'd be sailing. I'd be like hitting those, but then it catches up with you, and then so in the end I ended up doing like the exact same schedule you did. It's just like instead of it being this like steady product like tortoise and the hare kind of like the tortoise kind of rhythm, I was doing like a hare rhythm of like starts and then stops, starts, stops. Which that's just. But it worked out to that. Yeah,
there would be those days where I would pull that all-nighter, but I'm old enough now that the very next day I'm kind of useless, so
yes.
it actually evens out because I can't do anything the next day. I'm sloppy, so I might as well have just worked 8 hours across 2 days rather than 1 16-hour shift or whatever.
Tom, one thing that stands out in your comics to me is your art, your graphic style, very unique. Something that's developed over 20 years that I've known you. Any wrinkles, any new art stuff? Maybe even talk about your art process for anybody that's new to your work.
Yeah, I mean, my process, like where I'm at right now with my process, I've been kind of in this sort of zone for like maybe the past 3 projects. Like it was something I started with Transformers versus G.I. Joe of not inking my work with like traditional ink tools, but inking it with a pencil, like figuring out the composition and then redrawing the composition over a light box in pencil for a million reasons. And then coloring, hand coloring it, and then combining those things together. And so you have this kind of, where things blend kind of nicely because you have this kind of pencil that's like low fidelity and it kind of mixes really nice with the colors as opposed to like a super crisp inked line with these computer produced colors or like that always had kind of like a visual clash to me. And so this way of like using a pencil with kind of colors that look like they're hand colored by hand is kind of like that's the aesthetic where I'm at. So it started in Transformers versus G.I. Joe. It started in like the 2nd issue of Transformers versus G.I. Joe. It took me like an issue of doing it, straight before I was like, no, this is the way to do it. And then I did it in GoBots. I did it in Superpowers, and so I'm doing it here. Like it's still working for me. So it hasn't changed radically. One of the things I picked up along the way that I picked up in doing Superpowers and then brought to GoBots and then brought here is those like really like tons of panels on a page. Like that's developed, and I switched over to coloring on an iPad with like the Apple Pencil, so that change happened in GoBots. I was doing that in GoBots, so that's there. I mean, the only big wrinkle, like this project feels like I'm taking like a college class or something, like that I should be paying for it. Like I should be paying them for
Don't
it.
say that too loud.
Yeah, right.
It's a weird thing, man. Like how Marvel, DC, they pay you to become a better cartoonist.
Yeah, because that's exactly. I'm becoming a better cartoonist, and a big part of it is I'm referencing a ton of Kirby. So I'm like putting Kirby like under a microscope in a way I haven't since like before I was a professional. Like I'm like and it's a pleasure. It's like, so I'm just spending a lot of time with like Kirby's drawings, and so like I'm just getting better acquainted to that stuff, getting better like of understanding of like how he worked, and that's kind of adding to it a little bit. So it's like I'm going to Kirby College or something, and I haven't hit the books in that way since I was in college was the last time I hit the books on Kirby. I was watching just yesterday. I was watching a documentary about like the making of the Flash Gordon movie, the one with like the Queen soundtrack and stuff, and Robert Rodriguez was in it, and he said like when he like first knew Quentin Tarantino when they were like young, like Quentin was like an actor, like he was a wannabe actor, and he would write these scenes from and like his first writing, Quentin Tarantino's first screenwriting was things where he would take a scene from a movie he liked that he was going to perform in acting class, and then he would expand the scene so he could have like more like to work with in the acting class. And so that was his first writing, was he would take a scene from Flash Gordon. He would take the scene where like they all put their hand in the thing where there's the scorpion that's going to like sting your hand. He would take that and then he'd expand it, and that's how he learned to write. He learned to write from copying other people's movies and then just adding to the margin. Harry Nilsson learned to write songs. He would like play music in these like piano bars, and he'd play famous, and then he'd like forget what the lyrics are or forget what the tune is, and then add to that, and then before you know it, there's like a very easy transition from that into just writing like totally original compositions. So it is I see that.
That's a pretty common experience for comic book artists.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of the comic book artists I've talked to about this thing, we all started out copying panels and
Mm-hmm.
comics and covers and things that we liked as kids. With that in mind, any favorite characters or storylines from going back through Fantastic Four?
Yeah, and I kind of knew like what my favorite parts of Fantastic Four were, because I have like there's stuff I really like, there's stuff I don't like as much, and so like as I was working on it, it's like, ooh, here's where Black Bolt shows up. Like this is going to be so cool. Like I love the first issue of Fantastic Four. I think it's an amazing comic. Like I don't think it's like, oh, this clunky, lovable, but crappy relic the way like people seem to approach like those kind of things. Like I also don't think it's like this holy thing either. But it's just such a great comic. It's so good. It's down and dirty, but it like really delivers. So I love the first issue. I love when they discover Submariner in the Bowery. I love that issue. Like I love the early stuff. I love when Submariner and Doctor Doom team up and steal the Baxter Building. I love that stuff. And then for a while, I don't love a lot of the like it kind of like Fantastic Four gets into this groove where I'm not as into the stuff, but then the Inhumans show up. And then it's like, okay, now it's my favorite comic. When it's like, and that's like some people point to that. There's various peaks. Frank Miller says Kirby's like the Himalayas or whatever. Like there's lots of peaks in Kirby's work, but some say that's the peak of his work is that middle period of Fantastic Four where the Inhumans show up, and it's almost I think it's like exactly when Joe Sinnott starts inking the series regularly. It's like. Medusa, who'd been part of these like Frightful Four stories, all of a sudden there's this guy called Gorgon who shows up, and he's just from this other world, this other previous life that Medusa had that we've not heard anything about up until this point, and he's calling her back, like he's come to get her and pull her back into this old life, and that's like the beginning of the really cool stuff. And then more Inhumans start showing up. The Seeker, this kind of like obscure character who's like hunting the Inhumans, like he shows up, and then the Inhumans story wraps up, and then Silver Surfer shows up. So for me, that's like the Galactus, like when Silver Surfer first shows up and Galactus first shows up, that's like I'm in heaven with Fantastic Four at that point. So like I just drew that stuff a couple days ago. It was like a few weeks ago. I like when I drew the first panel where Black Bolt shows up, I'm like, okay, I'm having the time of my life right now. Like I've been enjoying this comic up to this point, but now like I'm just a pure fan. Like I'm just rocking out on this like stuff that I love, and then it's like when it's just a couple days ago, like the final page of issue 1 is like a big Silver Surfer drawing, and it's like this is so great. I'm loving this. This is so that's why. So it's like Inhumans show up, Silver Surfer shows up, Black Panther shows up. All these like subplots are all mixing together. The Inhumans are trying to escape from the dome, the negative zone dome that formed. Reed's exploring the negative zone. Blastar, Doctor Doom steals Silver Surfer's surfboard. They're like it's just magic. And this is like this is what everybody's trying to do when they do Marvel. It's like this never-ending pageant of like mixing storylines that just segue one into the other in an organic way, and it's magic for a while until it stops being magic. Like the wheels fall off the bike. And there's a bunch of reasons why it was so magical and why it stopped being so magical. But like that's the moment for me. So for me, like my job was coming up with stuff at the beginning to kind of get this train started, and then you got all that really cool stuff in the middle, and then coming up with like a way to tie it together. Like and a lot of it comes from just my. In some ways, it's like a critique and a celebration of the Fantastic Four. Like, there's all these things I love about the Fantastic Four, and then there's all these areas for improvement. So this is like my opportunity. Like, here's what I think. Here's and one of them was that because of the nature of serialized storytelling, they never got to Jack and Stan never got to like end their story. They created this story that really seemed like it was going somewhere, but it just never happened. It got handed off to other people, and they continued it, and for a million reasons. So it's like I want to make it a complete story. I want to make it where every bit of it means something, and it all adds up to this cohesive whole.
Is this the most fun you've had making a comic?
I mean, I've had some fun making comics. Yeah, I mean, there's moments where I'm working on this where this is a lot of fun. Like like maybe it's hard. Like I'm having a lot of fun. I'm having a ton of fun.
That's what's coming.
Yeah,
across.
It's so much fun. I'm having so much fun. The only thing, like Satan Soldier was a lot of fun too, though. So that's like that's the closest competitor. But Satan Soldier, I wasn't getting paid for. And I didn't know if it was going to have a home. Which, as of now, it's still like it exists as a webcomic, and I self-publish it, but it's so with this, it's like I'm having the time of my life, doing my thing, hanging out with Kirby. Like I'm hanging out with Kirby all day, and I know there's like I'm getting paid for it, and I know it's going to get this really nice presentation. So yeah, I guess this is the most fun I've had on a comic. Yeah.
When is this thing supposed to come out, man?
I don't know. Like I don't know.
It's funny because the reason this video is being released right now is because it's been announced.
Yeah.
And supposedly the video is live a little bit before San Diego Comic-Con because they told me that they want to try to get a little jump on all the San Diego Comic-Con hype. So they're announcing something that doesn't have a release date yet. Is that what you're telling me?
No, I mean I'm just not good with that kind of stuff. Like earthly matters, like I'm not good at. So like I don't know when it comes out, and I kind of don't want to know. Like I just got to stay in my bubble.
It's gonna have to be 2020 if this takes you 6 months.
I don't know. I don't because maybe I'll figure out a way. Like maybe I'll figure out a way to make it not take 6 months or whatever. But I don't. But again, like I don't want to worry about that right this minute. Like I'm in a good productive groove, so I don't want to think too. So I don't know, but maybe. Part of the announcement was saying when it's coming. I'd assume so.
You're gonna find out.
Yeah, I'm gonna find out too, and I'll be like, oh no, I gotta really, These are like the notebooks that I was talking about, where I have like 2 notebooks.
Yeah, hold it up higher.
Yeah, so these are the notebooks, and this one says FF, and this one says FF on the front, written real dimly in pencil, but
gray on gray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so these are like my Fantastic Four Bibles and stuff, and like some of the earliest stuff I wrote, like I kind of wrote, and I did the same, and actually GoBots is on the same page, but it's like I had like a philosophy for how to approach these kind of comics, these kind of like corporate comics or whatever you want to call it, and so I had like my philosophy. I wrote down like my philosophy for Fantastic Four, and it was and this was just for me. Like I didn't write this to tell anybody. These were just notes to myself.
We're on the edge of our seats.
In case I forgot it. So it's. A story should be like a family tree, each scene giving birth to the one that follows. How do Reed and Sue meet? How do Ben and Alicia meet? And then for the meeting of Reed and Sue, Reed's looking for a place to rent in the city. And the landlady says, earlier today I threw out a tenant who couldn't pay her rent. I can show you the room. He goes in, wham, struck by beauty. The girl is still there. And then the landlady says, you were supposed to be out of here this morning. And she says, I know, but my brother, had a blah, 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 and my brother had this and that and that. And then Reed says, how much does she owe you? I could pay. And so that would be like, that would be like the meeting of Reed and Sue. Didn't end up using that, but that's like the kind of thinking I'm doing. I'm just like trying to see scenes and try to see. There's things like that in these notebooks and
quite extensive. I mean, one of the biggest things that I ever learned from you was doing this extensive work beforehand, just to kind of maximize your opportunity whenever they finally shoot the little gun and send you off in racing. You could have a game plan immediately, man. So it's real cool that
and even if you don't and people talk about filling up notebooks and then doing their project and then going back to the notebooks and finding like all these great scenes that they totally forgot about. Why didn't I use it? It's just part of the process. You're priming the pump or you're planting the seeds or whatever that are going to grow, and it is good to like lay some kind of like a bed out that you're going to do this stuff in. There's like another one where it's Reed saying to his father, Nathaniel, saying, I'm on my way to college, Dad," and then Nathaniel says, "Who the fuck cares?" And then he says, and then Nathaniel Richards says, "I know this is it. You're leaving me, and it's easier for me to leave angry than leave sad." So it's like a bunch of scenes like that, and again, that one doesn't make it into the final version either, because I have Nathaniel disappears when Reed's like still a kid. He's like a time traveler, but as far as Reed's concerned, it's just like, okay, one day Papa was a Rolling Stone, one day Daddy just disappeared or whatever, and then he finds his father's papers and learns about secret society, learns about time travel, learns about this and that. So he wouldn't be there when he's in college. But anyway, that's the kind of that's the kind of thinking that I'm doing in those like earliest stages.
From production time up until the point where these books actually come out, man, it's a big window in between there, man. So I wonder, do you have any books coming out at any time soon? Like, when's the GoBots trade come out?
The GoBots trade comes. It's I don't have a solid date. It's like the end of July, so it'll be like either the third week of July or the fourth week of July. The trade comes out collecting like the whole GoBots series, and it's I approached that like GoBots, the thing of GoBots, like the toy and whatever. It's kind of like a punchline or whatever, but I didn't approach it that way. Like I approached it very seriously. Like I took it as seriously as I'm taking this Fantastic Four thing. And in a lot of ways, like one of the realizations I kind of made is that like this Marvel stuff, like the Fantastic Four and things, in the world of comics, these things are very important. Like these are like like the treasures of, and there's actually like some prestige attached to them in comics, which is kind of strange because when I think about it, they're actually not that different than it's still it's like stories for kids, like Pablum, basically, like designed for kids, but it's up to you, like what you want to do with it, like you could make a masterpiece out of it, and with GoBots, I was kind of because when I was working on pre-production on GoBots, I was also working on pre-production on this. I was working on them at the same time. I thought, what, like, I know there's a lot of prestige and stuff attached to Marvel and Fantastic Four, but I think this toy stuff, I might, like, in my heart of hearts, I might actually like it a little better because it's like GoBots, the pre-existing lore of GoBots is nothing like the lore of Fantastic Four is pretty great. You got like two of the greats, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, working on it. It's amazing. Like the comics are really good. Similar thing doesn't exist for GoBots, but for like where I'm coming from, like the Fantastic Four was always that's your dad's comics. Like at least like my age group or whatever. Like it didn't feel like art. It felt like it was something from a previous era. Where like GoBots and like Transformers and G.I. Joe, like they belonged to me. Like I was a little kid watching those cartoons and full into it. And these things were targeted straight at me. Where somebody who's older, Fantastic Four was that for them. So it was just interesting to me working on two things at the same time. One seemingly high prestige and one seemingly low prestige, and finding that they're actually like at least from my perspective, a lot closer.
It's like that acting thing. There are no small parts.
Mm-hmm.
Just I don't know how it actually goes.
Right? Yeah, there are no small parts, only small actors, maybe, or small players. Or
that sounds ableist. I think that's a good enough place to leave it. Hey, Tom, thanks for coming, dude.
Hey, thanks for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
Congratulations on Fantastic Four
Thanks
grand
again.
design.
Where should people follow you, Tom? Where should they
Follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli, or follow me on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
And all those links will be in the description of the video below.